I get the incredible honor of welcoming back probably the most conservative member of the United States Senate, probably the world's most foremost truth teller when it comes to the fraud of global warming, a dear friend of this program, a man who's written a must-read new book called The Greatest Hoax, How the Global Warming Conspiracy Threatens Your Future. Our friend, the senator from Oklahoma, Jim Inhofe. How are you, Senator?
Hey, Scott, I'm great. And I heard you say you're going to do the Jason Lewis show.
Will you come on with me tonight? I am tonight, yeah.
Yeah, because you may get me again, because I've been on that. I know I've got that rescheduled again here shortly. Anyway, that's great, and I'd love to talk to you guys up there because you have one of my favorite Oklahomans up there making everybody rich. That's Harold Hamm. And, the biggest problem that they have up north where he's drilling into those formations is they can't find people to work. I mean, you're dealing with full employment. And that's a lesson that the entire nation should be watching right now and realizing that we have a president who's had now a 4-year battle against fossil fuels. And so I think some things are happening right now that may turn this thing around.
I agree with you. By the way, Harold is a dear friend of this program, and I know you and I share a love for, more than anything, Harold's story, because it's the great American story. I mean, I call him the Steve Jobs of oil. Here's a guy that was a genius in putting together hydraulic fracturing and horizontal drilling, did it in the Bakken, and now the world's talking about the Bakken. And Harold was a pioneer of that, along with others in the industry, but Harold really led. And, it really is an amazing story. But what Harold came from, a son of sharecroppers, youngest of 14 kids or 12 kids, I forget how many kids in his family, and hand-me-downs, literally pumps gas out of high school, loves people in this wonderful oil and gas industry, and goes on to be America's oil champion, the single biggest oil holder. Is that not the great American story?
It really is. I had, back when we were a majority, Republicans were a majority, I chaired this Environment and Public Works Committee, which I will do again after the next election. But I had Harold Hamm here in Washington twice testifying before this Environment and Public Works Committee. And what's really great is to look at the faces of these senators who serve in that committee while he's testifying. Just a good old boy, wholesome, it's common sense, and he changed the thinking here in Washington just in 2 appearances. Harold's a great guy. He's doing a good job up there, and he's other places too.
By the way, one of my prized possessions is a voicemail I got from Harold about a year ago when I was undertaking some surgery at Mayo Clinic. Harold called, along with so many others, a really neat thing, and he left me the most profound message. I was foggy or something or unable to answer the phone, but it was a great message about how God will get you through this too, and God provides. And Harold's a man of God. He's a great guy. He's a wonderful success. And you know what? We love the fact that we're exporting some of that Oklahoma common sense to North Dakota in a big way with Harold Hamm too. So
yeah, great guy.
He's a good guy. So hey, speaking of, before we move on to the book, Harold has recently been tapped to head the Energy Policy Committee for the Romney folks. What did you make of the Romney folks insightfully tapping Harold Hamm's brain power?
I think that's a brilliant move on their part, and I don't dislike Mitt Romney. I've just never been a fan, and I think you get somebody like Harold Hamm who's so common sense. You look at him, and it is a very smart thing for them to do. I don't know specifically the role he'd have, but anything that he has influence over is a positive. So I think they pulled a pretty good move there.
Completely agreed. Tell me about the new book. I'm so excited about it. We talked about it briefly at CPAC. I knew it was coming. It is a must-read for everybody that wants to know about the fraud of science, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the thing that, because I know your audience, and they understand the issue more than other people do, but here's what they may not be aware of, and that is, I think I told you this, maybe not in our interview, but personally I had quit writing the book. I'd been working for 3 years on it, and when we defeated the last effort at cap and trade legislatively, remember it started with McCain-Lieberman 03, then McCain-Lieberman 05, and then ultimately the Waxman-Markey. Anyway, any of those cap and trade would have cost between $300 and $400 billion a year, but we defeated them. And it was in the beginning, it was a one-man shot because nobody else would join me because it was very unpopular. But when we found out in December of '09, right before Copenhagen, that Obama was going to try to do what he could not do through legislation, do it by regulation, I thought, well, that's going to be a lot more expensive than even if they had done it through legislation. And I think probably it's hard to explain to people, but if cap and trade costs between $300 and $400 billion a year, let's remember, I was complaining about the '93 tax increase of Clinton Gore. That was only $32 billion. This would be 10 times that great.
I mean, it raises the cost of everything. That's what people need to know. And by the way, the war is not over. That's what this book is about. The war is only beginning because of this administration. Short break and more about a great book, The Greatest Hoax, How the Global Warming Conspiracy Threatens Your Future, with our friend Senator Jim Inhofe on the other side of the break. Don't go away. On the Common Sense Club and the Scott Hennen Show, Senator Jim Inhofe, our friend, on the book The Greatest Hoax, How the Global Warming Conspiracy Threatens Your Future. Before the break, you were talking about the fact that you gave up the ghost a little bit thinking we won the battle. Then the Obama folks come in and they do this all by regulation. Increasing regulation, which again raises the cost of living and taxes. But I had to cut you off as we were going to the break. Anything more you wanted to say on the cost and what this will cost the consumer?
We have it teed up, I think, in a very effective way. Yeah, I remember, I'm old enough to remember what happened. I was in the House at that time in 1993 when the Clinton Gore had the largest tax increase in 3 decades. That was raising everything, marginal rates, capital gains, death tax, and all that. We're all outraged by that. That was a $32 billion tax increase. The global warming thing we're talking about, cap and trade, would be it'd be more than a $300 billion tax increase, 10 times greater than that tax increase of Clinton and Gore. That's why it's important that people understand that if they get by with this, doing it through regulation, it would be more devastating than servicing the $5.3 trillion deficit that this president has given us. That's the driving thing that people have to understand. And I think that message is coming through loud and clear. The fact, and I remember back in '09, I was on your show. That was right before going to Copenhagen to be the one-man truth squad over there and let people know that what we were not going to do here in the United States. That they came out with this thing with the EPA. I said, I have a feeling when I leave town that you're going to have an endangerment finding. I know we're kind of in the weeds here, but that will allow you to regulate greenhouse gases. If that happens, it has to be based on a science. What science will you use? And she said, well, we use the IPCC. That's the United Nations. Well, it couldn't have been more appropriate, Scott, because it was, I call it poetic justice. It wasn't days after that, it was hours after that ClimateGate happened, and the legitimacy of that science was completely refuted. So anyway, what I'm saying is they're going to try to do this thing. The cost of this regulation would be greater than anything we've experienced in this country before, and that's why you need to read the book. You need to understand what you can do to stop this thing, as you and I talked about during the CPAC.
Yeah, inform yourself, and really, this to me is the grassroots of America that can fix this. And I always say, I wrote a whole book about the Tea Party movement because I was so spun up about it, called Grassroots. And what I love more than anything is defying the myths about the Tea Party, because a lot of people think the Tea Party is about one thing only and one thing only: spending. But it's really about, especially where I come from, and I've been to tea parties in Oklahoma with Charlie Meadows, and I've been to tea parties in North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota. These are God-fearing, freedom-loving, Constitution-worshiping folks that care about everything. One of the biggest applause lines is the Holocaust of abortion must end. Boy, tell that to somebody that the Tea Party is about the life movement. It is, though. And the second biggest applause line is global warming is a fraud. So, to me, the grassroots of America, the Tea Party movement, the common sense conservative faithfuls out there, they'll help you win this battle against this regulation jihad coming from the Obamatrons, won't they?
Yeah, well, they really will. And, of course, the other side is out there. I think you probably know I was supposed to be on the Rachel Maddow show last night, and she bagged it at the last minute. And so now we're offering for tonight and so forth. Well, you get just the opposite side. Remember the criticism she had of me was that in the book that I have, just in a 320-page book, on 2 occasions I used scripture in there, and she was using that against me. And I would say, if I had quoted Mein Kampf or the Communist Manifesto, there wouldn't have been any complaint. But that's what we're dealing with here, and we have extremists on the other side that you don't want to take lightly. They're
statists. They're secularists. They are, but the power of the truth, veritas in Latin, will win all. And that's what your book, Senator, does so well. It just kills them with the truth.
It does. So, and one of the chapters that is the longest one is the one on the United Nations that shows this whole thing was cooked up by the United Nations way back in 1972, and what's going to happen about 4 months from now? They're going to have the big Earth Summit re-meeting remember in Rio, that's when they started the whole thing on Kyoto. They're having the Rio plus 20 meeting there, which is going to be another effort of the United Nations to take over the regulation of greenhouse. It's cap and trade at their level. So the threat is still out there. They're going to do all they can to accomplish this, but we need to know as conservatives how serious this is, and that this is something that we can stop. But we have to get more people informed. That's what it's all about.
That's what it's all about, and we can do it. By the way, Rachel Maddow, I mean, seriously, I admire you for going to the Lion's Den. I've done Ed Schultz's show many times. I enjoy it, and I think it actually is something we ought to do as conservatives, not be afraid to take arguments there. But you're not going to convince 10% of that audience, so which, by the way, is minuscule compared to the conservative talk radio / talk TV audience anyway. So it's her loss.
Hey, Scott, you are number 46 now in less than 10 days. I'm talking about the talk radio and getting around. That is the way to do it. On the other hand, you want to be able to at least throw this out. If I'm able to say on Rachel Maddow successfully that even the EPA director admitted that if we go through all this thing and we start going through cap and trade and all that expense, that it still is not going to reduce greenhouse gases, and that's by her own admission. And once the liberals hear this, we get a few of them over. At least we keep the dialogue going. So I don't mind going into the Lion's Den. Frankly, in fact, you should pull up the website called greatesthoax.com. The publisher has that. In that, they have my interview with Alan Combs and with several liberals. I think you'd enjoy that.
Oh, I love it. We'll put it up at ScottHennen.com, thegreatesthoax.com. Definitely going to do it. 2 other quick things here in our remaining time. And by the way, I'll have you for a full hour tonight if your schedule allows. On Jason Lewis is with me tonight on national radio, and we'll invite every global warming Kool-Aid drinker to call in, and we can have a field day. So
they told me that was actually scheduled for it's another week away, so that won't be tonight.
We could do 2 of them. But anyway, here is 2 things I want you to tell our audience about. One is Barbara Boxer, when you were sitting next to her at the State of the Union address, because the president's running around the country taking credit now for oil and gas production being up, and kind of having, his Secretary of Energy disavowed his comments
about 4 years.
Yeah, after 4 years. So there's a game going on, and you are privy to what the inside game is because you sat next to Barbara Boxer. Tell our audience.
I did. That was the attempt by the Democrats to not have all the Democrats on one side and Republicans on the other side. And the reason for that, Scott, you understand, is that the majority of the people in America agree with us. So they wanted to get us all mixed up. Well, she's the one who asked that I sit there, and we're on this committee together. So what was happening was this. The president made this pitch that I'm for clean energy, I'm for natural gas, all this stuff. Then he threw out this thing, and it was all prearranged, because I know that because I was sitting next to Barbara Boxer. He said, we got to do something about hydraulic fracturing. Well, as you know, people in North Dakota certainly know, and Harold knows, that you can't get a cubic foot of gas out of a type formation without hydraulic fracturing. My state of Oklahoma was where it started in 1949, and there's never been a confirmed date.
Absolutely. Like total fraud. And what was the last line, though, she said? His last line that she said, there, we got you.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, he goes on, and then he finally gets to, but we got to do it with some sort of reference to the green agenda. She turns to you and says what?
And he kept his commitment to the far left by saying, "Don't worry, you listen carefully and you'll hear that I'm really not going to do it."
Yeah, exactly right. And Barbara Boxer confirmed it all. God bless you, Senator Jim Inhofe. Great book, and we'll have you back. Thank you, sir.